Hello, Geminis. Welcome to a full 2026 tarot reading where we are going to be looking at every single month for you in the year 2026 to get a full understanding in the realms of love and romance. For your sign. Now, in this reading, we're going to be using a tarot deck called the Yokai Tarot Deck. Oh my goodness, I can see the Lover's card coming out already. This is wonderful. Now, the Yokai Tarot Deck is a deck that is based off of the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which means the interpretations are going to be the same. The only difference is that when we zoom in and give you a nice close look into this deck here, you're going to get to see Japanese mythological folklore. We are also going to use a secondary deck that is called the Dark Fantasy Tarot Deck as a bit of extra energies for what will be happening in each month. Now, please bear in mind, because this is a full year reading, this is going to be a lengthy video. It is the kind of video that later on in the year, if you choose to come back and revisit this video, I will put the timestamps in the description below so that you can see exactly what month you might want to revisit or fast forward to get a better understanding as you go along in 2026. Now, with that being said, we are going to get into it here. I am going to show you how this layout operates, and then we will zoom right in. Okay, so we have cards that express the energies of January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. I almost gave myself one extra card there. All right, so we have the entire 12 months here. I almost gave you a sneak peek of January 2027. We'll do that next year. Like I said, these videos are going to be here all year, but let's get into it. Starting off with January, you have the energy of the Four of Swords. Now, the Four of Swords in this particular deck looks exhausted. And to some of you, that may be that in the month of January 2026, you have that exhausted energy. By the way, I want to say that I'm going to be looking at this reading in terms of people who are in relationships and also people who are not in relationships but have their eye on somebody. And then for those of you who are single as well and looking to start dating, I'm going to tackle all these areas. But because the main energy is almost this sense of the look of exhaustion in January 2026, I want you to understand that from those three different perspectives. Because the exhaustion here isn't about there being a reason to be exhausted in 2026, but more so it's the energy of somebody who is in a position of healing. It's called the card of the Hermit's Repose, from an exhaustion that happened prior to. So if you had exhaustive energy in and around December or in this previous year, since I'm making this video in the year 2025, then you may find that in January, it's solitude time, it's downtime, not necessarily that time where you want to charge forward in the realms of love. Let me use that other deck though, and grab a bit of a clarification card here, because again, for people who are in a relationship, it could be one thing that's vastly different than those of you who are single or looking to date. Like if you are in an exhausting, just healing from that exhaustion mode in January, it could be because in the previous weeks there was some difficulty that you had with a partner. For those of you who are separated, that may be the reason why there was exhaustion. It could be an actual separation that had occurred that has led you to this healing point where it's more of a solitude energy. And for those of you who are looking to date, the exhaustion could be because you had spoken to people that were not meshing well with you. A little bit of irritability with how the dating pool is difficult to look through, but also whether you're in a relationship or you're wondering if you're going to get back together with somebody after a bit of a period of exhaustion in the previous weeks, or again, whether the exhaustion is you in an energy of being single. It's the healing aspect that's the most important. It's the solitude to give you time to think that's most important. I also want to say Oh, you know what? By the way, if you hear my kids in the background, thank you for bearing with me on that. I am a mom who has to do this on her own, watching the kids while also trying to bring you guys these awesome and intense and in-depth ways of looking at your year. So work with me here. But in this energy, with this solitude and downtime, it's also coming with the Four of Pentacles. You see the dark fantasy vibe on this deck now? These are beautiful decks. If anybody's ever interested, again, it's the Yokai Tarot deck and the Dark Fantasy Tarot. And this brandishes the energy of the Four of Pentacles, which is it's in the reversal position though. It's typically a card of somebody who has difficulty letting go of something, which is why that gentleman in that picture is holding on and gripping to this coin, has multiple coins at the bottom of his feet that he's contemplating and staring at. And remember, the pentacles are the things that you value. When I say it's the things that you value, that shows up differently for each one of you. But in the realm of pentacles, think whatever it is, think of it as something that shows up in your three-dimensional world. Some people hold on to money. That's the thing that shows up for them in the three-dimensional world. It's what they focus on. A pentacle is what you value, right? Some people value money. For others of you, you value your house. And so that could be the pentacle that you're focused on at this time, trying to organize your finances even. Maybe you value your job. These are things in the outside world that show up once we focus on them and manifest them into our lives. But for many of you, love is what you value. Even though it doesn't look like a physical object, it shows up in physical people. So again, it's this idea in the month of January, in your solitude, after dealing with exhaustion in romance or love, at taking the time to analyze what it is you value or who it is you value. There's one thing though that I want to mention about the Four of Pentacles. It's in tandem with the energy of the Three of Pentacles. So both of these decks are based off of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which Arthur Edward Waite gave instructions on how to interpret the Rider-Waite-Smith deck in 1910 in a book he published called The Pictorial Key to Tarot. And Arthur Edward Waite, that is the man who created the most famous deck that most tarot readers use and most tarot decks are based off of. When he spoke of the Three of Pentacles and the Four of Pentacles, they come in succession to one another, of course, he spoke of the word pettiness and mundane, so especially in the reversal position. And so for some of you, there may be a non-enthusiastic energy that's connected to who you're dealing with or how you're viewing relationships. For some of you, if you were in a relationship with somebody, again, it could feel like there was petty interactions that didn't need to be there, and yet they were showing up in your life. And that also includes those of you who may have had interactions in the past with somebody that you're separated with. Again, there could be almost a non-enthusiastic dragging on or petty energy in the communication that had happened in the past. And again, for those of you who have tried to date, you may have found in the realms of your singlehood that the people that you were interacting with were just bringing a very almost monotonous or mundane or lack of enthusiastic energy that didn't spice things up for you. But according to what we're about to talk about in the month of February, that's about to change because you immediately got the Lover's card at this point early on in 2026. Let's just bring that out to the center point of view here. The Lover's card has shown up. What a beautiful energy to get. In fact, when I have discussed the previous readings of Aries and Taurus, it took them all the way to the end of 2026 to harvest this kind of energy. Some other horoscope signs that I've done did not receive the Lover's card at all. And here you are with this energy of unity, of balance, of the potential of coming together with someone. And again, each one of you is in a different sphere. For those of you who are single, this is that time in February where you start to speak with somebody that actually gets you into a balanced energy, a passionate vibe, and viewing the potential, whether it's long-term in the predicament or person that you end up meeting in February or end up speaking to. We'll see the pattern emerge over the next couple of months if it looks like you stick around speaking with this person. And for those of you who are in an established relationship, you could see in the month of February between you and your partner things becoming balanced again. After that mundane and exhausting or even solitary energy that showed up in the month of January, suddenly we have unity here. For those of you who are separated from your person, February is that time where you communicate with this person again, according to this kind of energy. It is reminiscent of the paradise energy. What I mean by that, when I say that, is traditionally the Rider-Waite-Smith deck is the depiction of the lovers in the Garden of Eden, in the heavenly paradise, in this place where people see beautiful trees, beautiful gardens, heavenly energy here on earth, essentially. And so this very passionate potential and carnal body, sometimes even lustful and yearning energy, can come out of this time frame in the month of February with a card like the Lovers. Now, let's grab a clarification card to see how this energy evolves throughout the month of February here. No way. Wow. We just doubled down on the energy of the Lovers twice over. That, I don't think I have experienced that coming out. It's taken me aback for a second here. I don't think I've seen that come out in a very long time. I mean, years since I have seen the Lovers card clarified with the Lovers card. And traditionally, you might find, even in a modern sense, you might find tarot readers who will look at the Two of Cups as a soulmate energy, or the Six of Cups as a soulmate energy, or the Lovers card as a soulmate energy. Sometimes if any of those cards comes with an Empress or an Emperor card, then all of a sudden we have this thought again from a tarot reader's perspective of, holy moly, this is fated. This is soulmate energy. But to have the Lovers, a traditional soulmate energy, clarified by a doubling down of the Garden of Eden soulmate energy is enhancing that understanding of unified, sanctified unity, relationships, togetherness. Somebody that you meet that you are supposed to meet. And what, no better time in honesty than the month of February. If you've ever take the time to go look astrologically at what's happening celestially in the world of astrology in the month of February, there's some heavy transition energies happening that will lead a lot of people to new vantage points in love. For those of you who are single, again, you are meeting somebody who lights you up. For those of you in a relationship or with your eye on somebody, you find yourself being completely lit up. This is just like snuggly, cuddly, intimate, holding each other in your arms energy. That feeling of paradise on earth. And I'm stunned. Let's move on to the next month and see how this progresses as we get into the month of March. The next energy that we have is the Justice card in the reversal position. This is a major arcana card. Very valuable because typically we want the Justice card to be in the upright position to show this dynamic of fairness and balance. But as they say, what goes up must come down, what goes down must come up again, and the cycle continues here in our life experience. I will say, though, that having this card in the reversal position, which is the way it showed up here in this reading, doesn't necessarily denote that you have an imbalance that's occurring. Because it's a major arcana card, Arthur Edward Waite, in his traditional understanding, didn't interpret the major arcana cards in reversal concepts the way that he had an understanding of when looking at the minor arcana, the cards numbered 1 through 10 in the different suits. Because they are the cards of big secrets in the major cards, the major arcana and the trump cards, it speaks of things as fact regardless of their upright or reversal energy. And when I say as fact, it means justice, in this case, in this card, will be served depending on the actions that you've done. If you have done actions in the preceding months that bring up passionate experiences, then you will have you reap what you sow energy come up. If you have experienced pettiness in the preceding time up to the Justice card, then again, you will have a reap what you sow energy in that dynamic. So for each one of you, it will be different, which leads me to shuffling again the Dark Fantasy Tarot deck and seeing what dynamic of justice or balance or reaping what you sow energy shows up for you. to see if it shifts things as we clarify from a more balanced position to a potential unbalance. The card that we have here is the Queen of Cups. What a lovely energy. Now, the Queen of Cups is the queen or the energy of a person who deals with fairness. She is also the card of a person who enjoys serving for the other person. If she had a love language, her love language would be acts of service, even though she's a card that's typically in a modern sense connected to emotions, the watery energy. People connect the elements to things like water when they look at the cups. But in her more traditional form, she's more of a service in the three-dimensional world kind of person. In fact, most people attribute the Queen of Pentacles as somebody who would deal with the three-dimensional world serving. She's actually the card of, the Queen of Pentacles is actually the card of a person who uses their intelligence, which you would often think is for the Queen of Swords. See, modern tarot has decided, I feel a lot of the times, to not look at the original instructions of a given deck. And each deck comes with its own instructions. So again, the Queen of Cups loves so much, so justly, with so much fairness, that she wants to serve the other person. And so when we have the Queen of Cups in an upright position and we have two people who come together for the betterment of each other, you have a very, very strong bond and potential to take that Justice card and reap amazing energies for that month of March. Now, fairness insinuates, and both of these cards have that traditional aspect of fairness. It insinuates fairness not in the way that humans usually think, but fairness in the way that the divine usually thinks. In each tradition, or whatever your belief system is, it may be different. You may believe in God, a creator, Holy Spirit, divine feminine, whichever you want to call that energy, Ruach. That perspective of fairness comes from that side, comes from the spiritual world, where we could think that being together forever and ever with a partner is the perfect outcome, the white picket fence. We do have to remember, in the realms of fairness, from the perspective of a higher place, our higher selves, fairness sometimes does look like giving someone the time to breathe, giving a partner the time to breathe, the time to think, not smothering the energy of the relationship so like a flame it gets put out. There is a respect that should be had in the month of March that comes along with the interdependent qualities that humans should have in a relationship. Not being too codependent, not being too independent, but fairly being interdependent. And if you can handle that aspect of not smothering things too quickly and not branching into the realms of fairness from the material perspective, from modern society, from dating in the year 2026, and take it back to an unconditional love, very spiritual sense, I think that in the month of March, you will do well with whoever you're talking to, whether this is somebody that you are just starting to get used to, get to know, want to come together with, like the Queen of Cups, who loves to come together with people, or whether this is a spouse that you're already interested in, or whether it's somebody you've had your eye on for quite some time. Now, we are heading into the month of April now, which we come into a bit of a different perspective. We are suddenly going into the realms of a little bit of illusion, a little bit of subtle trickery, because the Knight of Cups usually acts as a messenger card, bringing and announcing things. But in the reversal, there is a historical connection with this card for the messenger or the knight that was going from one castle to another kingdom to send a message. That knight sending the message wasn't doing it properly, or may have been underhanded with what they were communicating, or perhaps hidden some kind of a truth. The message suddenly gets obscured. But because the Knight of Cups deals with both trickery in an outright sense, which causes difficulty in a relationship, but also deals with subtleties that they might not know are full-blown illusions or trickery. Sometimes a person says something that they don't realize was not the right thing to say, essentially. It subtly gets past them. I'm going to shuffle with my tarot deck here and kind of see how that energy might play out in April. Why it is that there's this energy of either fraudulent speaking or trickery, or whether it is somebody who has withheld something, even subtly omitting something that they might later find should not have been withheld. We have the Four of Cups here, not a card of trickery, but a card of stubbornness. It looks like in the month of April, what you might find is you or a person that you're dealing with have a opinion about the way the relationship is being handled or the goals that you have. And that opinion is driving a bit of a wedge into how the relationship could properly unfold. And when the Four of Cups ends up like this, when a person seemingly ignores the hand of the universe that we saw was trying to guide them earlier on, instead they look at the world through that more modern lens. Remember, I said there was a difference in the realms of dating in the year 2026, in the year 2025, where everybody thinks, you know, first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes a baby in the baby carriage. Meanwhile, in history, it was arranged marriages, and there was, in certain cultures, you didn't even have men interacting with women. There was like separation. Our modern view of dating is vastly different historically, the way that dating used to be. And there's a person seemingly who has their ideas in this dynamic here in April of how they think a relationship should unfold, which is coming from a place of limited thinking and a bit of a stubborn energy when the Four of Cups is here. That's why this person is looking at what they view and ignoring that the universe is trying to give them an alternative outcome. So for those of you who are acting in the energy that we previously saw of the Queen of Cups, understanding fairness, understanding justice that showed up in the previous energies, then it is wise to understand ahead of time that this is one of the things that you see in relationships. People who have different perspectives, people who are evolving through those different perspectives, especially when those perspectives are tied into social material existence that they think is the say all and be all. It's the way people live. It's just how it is. Sometimes it changes from city to city even. You could have a person who just sees life the way it is and they live in a little village. Sometimes you have somebody who lives in the big city and they view things totally differently. You know, you see there's almost a cultural aspect that can come with these kind of things, which makes sense when we have the Knight of Cups, who is a person who travels from culture or one kingdom in history. In the medieval ages, the knight traveled from one kingdom and sent a message to the next kingdom. So just be careful about that in the month of April. That again, it's wise to understand that people from different ways of life can have a different view of things, and the forgiveness and understanding that a person is going to go through that. Also, the respect that the universe can and does have the ability to deal with, as the hand shows here, can and does have the ability to take a person who might be thinking in that frame of mind, limited, not thinking there's an outcome, thinking things have to go a certain way, and change it for them. The universe can help and assist to change that kind of a tone and that kind of a belief system, but it does take time. So not rushing a relationship and forcing the change of the dynamic is something I would also caution against. And if a person does have to go through a changing of a perspective in the month of April, there's no better association to that energy existing than a person or the partner, yourself perhaps, or the other person, acting as an energy of safety for that person. If there's a stubborn person and they can't see the outcome, if they have a partner that makes them feel safe, this is what I'm getting at when I say this, then they're more prone to change that perspective because somebody has given them the kindness and understood them from a human position of having this kind of perspective and it being okay, it not being the worst thing. Letting a person feel safe in that energy allows for a lot biologically and chemically to happen. Oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, and those chemicals in the body, that energy of feeling safe allows for more intelligence, more intuition, more new perspectives to come through because their body isn't pent up with adrenaline, cortisol, stress hormones to a person who already has a rigid or limited thinking. We wouldn't want their body to be rigid and limited as well. it stumbles up the whole progress. And so just a heads up on that. From a biological position, if that month of April brings some difficulties, let it be in a safe way. Let it be that a human has the ability to have these thoughts and make these changes on the time that their body needs to, yourself included. Okay. For the month of May now, we have the Three of Cups in the reversal. This is interesting because the Three of Cups traditionally has to do with celebration and coming together. In the reversal, sometimes people feel like it's separation and coming apart, which you did get it in the reversal. So some of you in the realms of dating may find that in the month of May, you're not talking as much with this person. Or if you're in a relationship already, again, there's a lot of potential downtime. But the reason behind it, I think, is really telling, especially when you take into consideration the previous two cards. Remember, the Justice card is a card, yes, of fairness, but where does justice happen? It happens in the institutional world of the court buildings. The Knight of Cups, where is it that they travel to and from? As I mentioned already, they go from kingdom, one kingdom, the institution of that kingdom, the rules and law of that kingdom, and they travel to a different kingdom to send a message. So we have two cards preceding this Three of Cups that talk about the way a person deals with their views in society, institutionally. And the Three of Cups in the reversal has a tendency to refer to overindulgence inside of a society. And by overindulgence, it can look like somebody who has to tackle the dynamics of forms of gluttony, like over thoughts about a lot of money, avarice, that's institutional stuff, right? That's societal, jobs, finances, money. But also, see, the cups in their hand can be connected to indulgences in food, health, over drinking, substance use, especially more so when this is in the reversal position as you received it. So some of the difficulties that a person might have from April, even March, April, and May, as it goes from super passionate and transitions more into the reality that this is just a human. You are just humans. And sometimes, again, what goes up can come down. What goes down can get stale a little bit. Then it can go back up. When you have these dynamics like this, it feels like somebody's energies are shifting into the body, into that stubbornness, and then reaching, once they get into that mood or into that mode, reaching to the world around them to satisfy some of that feeling of monotony and mundane. Let's grab a dark fantasy clarification card here to see what's happening in that month of May a little bit more so. Oh, give me 1 second. I just shuffled my cards inside out and backwards. Some of these cards are now upright. Some of them are in the reversal. I'm going to pause this video and I'm going to correct my deck. Bear with me for one moment. All right, there we go. I have fixed my deck here. I guess they got an extra shuffle in that. So with the Three of Cups, we have the Eight of Pentacles. See, I had a feeling this was institutional, society-based. The Eight of Pentacles is the card of the master to the student. And when I say the master to the student, you can see an artisan carefully crafting his coins on this card. It's the card of education. Quite frankly, that's what he's doing. He's learning a skill set. And of course, this can show up not just in the realms of education and schooling, even though it is the card of education, but it can show up for somebody who is learning a skill in relationships. It can show up for people who are learning a skill on their job site. But think institutional, think societal when it comes to this dynamic. And merging that with the Three of Cups, it can be somebody who's overwhelmed with whatever might be happening in their career-based financial or lifestyle world. That's requiring them to monitor and navigate that side of their place in society, of how they're learning skills in society, and then try to merge that with a relationship at the exact same time, or talking or dating, and you might see difficulties and almost an overwhelming feeling coming up. Now, this could be for a person you're speaking to, but this could also be for you, depending on what energy you sit in. And each one of you is different. Some of you, like I said, are single in the world, and all of a sudden, by the time you get to the month of May, you start really kind of tapping into the more financial side or the more career-based side, and it gets a little overwhelming. Perhaps you want to put dating a little bit on hold. Or some of you, because the Three of Cups is a partying energy when it's in the reversal, some of you might be hanging out with associations in your friend world, even in your friendship life, that might cause your energy to be a little bit drained, while also your job life or your financial life is also getting a little bit heavy or important. And doing all of that at once gets a little bit difficult to navigate. For those of you who are in a relationship, again, you might find that you or your partner have a almost split going on between how you're handling your friendship dynamics in life or your social circle, or perhaps overeating, over drinking, overspending money, too much shopping, while also trying to navigate your financial life at the same time. It does also remind me, for those of you who may be in an on and off dynamic with a person that you've been dealing with, because again, there's passion that happens February, and then it kind of gets a little mundane as the months progress, and like a focusing on navigating a more internalized world, that by the time you get into May, one or both of the people who are kind of watching each other from a distance might be involved in an aspect of their social life that has nothing to do with the other person. You could be watching your person, hanging out with their friends instead of necessarily giving so much energy towards you. Because the Three of Cups does come with energies of separation and doing things on their own. And the Eight of Pentacles, if you look at that again, that is a interdependent, on their own individual, focusing on skills and focusing on the craft of their art or the craft of their finances, that sometimes doesn't necessarily involve a lot coming from a relationship or another person. Now, the month of June is next. As we come halfway through the reading here, and we have the High Priestess, which is a lovely energy to get because it insinuates that whatever it is that's happening in love and romance is supposed to be happening when the High Priestess is sitting in the upright position like this. The High Priestess is a person who deals with intuition leading them. If you think of a priestess in the temple grounds of previous histories and ancient cultures, this person is often not seen, but they are on a path that's very important. And so because this is the card depicting somebody who is in line with their spiritual path, it insinuates that in the month of June, if you are dealing with somebody, you are exactly where you're meant to be. If you are in a passionate relationship, if you are on a bit of a pause, that is where you're meant to be at that point. If you are focusing on your skill, again, that is where you're meant to be. It's a beautiful energy to get. That means that you're on the right path. Again, I say that repetitively here, but it's true. And it also helps to lessen up any of the more negative energy that's happened in any of the previous months when things get a little mundane or they get a little bit too focused on the social, institutional world, especially because the High Priestess deals with the spiritual side. In fact, what's really nice about this card, now that I think about it, now that I let my intuition flow that much more in this reading, is over 100 years ago, Arthur Edward Waite described in a very almost secretive, passive way that the High Priestess is the card that tears down rigid thinking in the card that's called the Hierophant, which is the card of the Pope. We have a card called it's kind of like the priest, and then this is the High Priestess. These two cards go hand in hand in traditional tarot. But again, Arthur Edward Waite mentioned that the job almost of the High Priestess could be perceived as taking away the power of the Pope. Because in his understanding, the Pope card or the Hierophant card was the card of rigid institutional thinking, overly dogmatic and in need of being torn down, which means by the month of June, if somebody's stubborn thoughts of the way they think their world should exist, that they're clinging on to with that original Four of Cups card we saw in the beginning, gets too clung to, that their thoughts of society are too dominant in their life, their thoughts of finances and money become so over consuming in their life, then in the month of June, that'll get torn down a little bit. The person who's thinking way too rigidly Like they have to get their money like this. They have to have their job like this. Money or status or society, dating should be this way. That rigid line of thinking, it's almost a very militant style of thinking. It'll get pulled back a little bit in the month of June in favor of a more spiritual approach, which is useful in terms of relationships, because the most beneficial relationships that you can have are going to be the ones that have a spiritual mind instead of a coveting, power, status-based thinking. Let's pull an extra card here. The Lover's card has come back out. It is in the reversal position. Now, as I had mentioned in the month of May, that there was instances where people seemed to be a little bit separate. The energy still feels like there's a less clingy and separate dynamic in the month of June. And that is why the High Priestess is here, to allow a person to think and receive intuition spiritually from within and understand how their rigid thinking has affected the relationship. Basically put, we can look at this card as in to say, why is this person going to go through a spiritual transformation? Because the Lover's situation is so important in the path that they are on, that the universe needs them to experience something to shift them out of their rigid thinking. Honestly, that's the meaning right there. I don't need to go too much further into the energies of June because of that, because those are two major arcana cards. As I mentioned, the major arcana cards, the cards of the big secrets, they have one big secret to each of those cards. The Lover's card is the balance was supposed to happen. The Garden of Eden is supposed to be a fallen situation so that people can heal themselves. That's the secret of this card, if you think of it in a one quick sentence way of looking at it. And the High Priestess card is the card of the true temple of God, leading people to go exactly through what they need to go through. See how that works out? So this is a transformational time in terms of dating and relationships in the month of June. If you're not talking to anybody at that point in June, it's fairly safe to understand that it will be you who is transforming on a very spiritual level, so that you can see how your views of dating and how your views of romantic life have impacted you and got you into essentially the position that you are currently in at that time. Onwards to the month of July, and we have another major arcana card with the Judgment card here. This card is unique because the traditional meaning of it is a little bit different than the modern understanding. Whereas people in a modern sense, they get almost like they cling to a view of this card in a evangelical, modern Catholic, Book of Revelations view of things. A resurrection kind of energy, which it does have to some degree in the ancient world, but it's connected again to a tearing down of that rigid thinking. Because essentially what happens in the explanation that Arthur Edward Waite gives, I'm going to give you a bit of a historical lesson here, is Arthur Edward Waite speaks of the judgment, speaks of all of the cards that he is dealing with in the deck he created as having a potential connection to a group of mystic Christians. So not modern Catholicism, but mystic Christians that were persecuted in 1200 AD called the Albigensians. In the introductions of his books and many conversations that he's had on this topic, he believes that the language in tarot may be connected to a secret language that they used to speak because they were trying to pull down the power of the Catholic Church, which is why there are so many cards of like the Pope and the High Priestess, one temple versus another temple, one kingdom trying to tear down another kingdom. And so the Judgment card was the card of the true Christians. Again, Arthur Edward Waite considered that the Albigensians were trying to express that they thought they were the true Christians, and they believed that they would be called, so it's the card of the calling, called to return to truth and source and their positions with God, leaving the Judgment card not to be about people of the Catholic Church getting resurrected, beam me up Scotty, but instead a whisper of the Holy Spirit, more so the divine feminine, because that culture of the Albigensians, they believed the God of the Old Testament was the wrong God, and they actually believed the divine feminine was the correct spirit of wisdom that was guiding them. And because this is the old school way of looking at the card of judgment here, then if we bring that into like the macrocosmic worldview or their historical worldview of this old culture, the Albigensians, and into your microcosm life, in the month of July, it insinuates that there will be a calling that's happening. Communication can be happening at this time in July, but also a pulling, a yearning towards the truth, towards the true path. So in tarot, again, you see also this idea in the Tower card, where Arthur Edward Waite describes that the church, once it gets pulled down with the Hierophant card losing its power, because the High Priestess is the spirit that's supposed to kind of win out and have the truth, the right path, your right purpose. When it pulls down the power of the Hierophant card, it does it with the Tower card. A judgment or a calling occurs, and the Tower crumbles down. Rigid thoughts of everything from jobs, economy, how you're dealing with things in society gets pulled down, the Tower crumbles down, and things can be grown back up again in the New World card that comes to the end of tarot. The Judgment card is that time. It's not just a judgment in terms of resurrection in a Catholic sense, but in your year here, it's the person who holds this rigid worldview. They're going to have a judgment against them that calls them towards the truth so they don't stay in the rigid form anymore. And we saw that dynamic showing up in the High Priestess card. Having these two cards 1 month next to each other is no surprise to me, because that is how it goes. The High Priestess is what leads you to the Judgment card. In fact, in those ancient traditions that I was just talking about, the High Priestess is the card that's known as the Spirit of Wisdom, which was called Sophia, the Divine Feminine Sophia. Again, this is where we get the Greek word philosophy from, for the love, Philo, Sophia of wisdom, for the love of wisdom, Philo, Sophia. Well, in these ancient Gnostic traditions, Christian mysticism traditions, guess who Sophia was? She was in the shape of the serpent who pulled us out of the Garden of Eden. Not a story of a serpent that trapped us or tricked us, but instead that the serpent led people through destiny, through hardship, like the lotus flower, pushing up through the water, up through the muddy difficulties of life, so that they could see on the other side that the rigid worldview that they had was needing to come down and get torn away. So judgment time comes in July. Peeling back the layers of the onion comes back in July, so that a person in this dynamic, you or a person you're chatting with or interacting with, is going to come out, should be for the better. And it is. As I can even see from the rest of the reading that we're going to see a little bit farther down, the Chariot card is coming up. So somebody does gain victory. It's a beautiful energy of victory at the end of this reading, but we'll get to that in a moment here. Let's move on to the month of August. This is fascinating, because the King of Swords, this is going to be very straightforward. He is the military leader. The King of Swords, I just mentioned that a lot of the thinking that's happening in this reading is somebody who is very over-logical, who's very rigid, who believes their world has to only exist in society in a certain way. They have to make certain money. They have to have a house in a certain place. That's all aspects of overly logistical, militant thinking. And the King of Swords is what that is. He's the militant leader. And in the reversal position, it is somebody who is resisting the path that they were just given in the previous months. They're resisting it because of their logic. So this calling begins in the month of July for them to change, for them to not be so rigid. And for 1 extra month in the month of August, in the reversal position, they are fighting against that. This person, whether it's your view of dating, your view of relationships, or whether it's the person that you're chatting to, or a person that you're with in a relationship, it's almost like you do not want the change to happen, or they do not want the change to happen because they logically can't grasp onto how it could work in some other view. So that happens when somebody, wants to live in a certain location, wants to have a certain job, sees their place in society, and they cannot see that they could have any other outcome. They're like, I have to be a doctor. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. or I have to live in Arizona. I'm not going to have success if I live any other way. The universe is apparently swooping in and around July and August to say, essentially, and to guide the path, that there is a different way. But usually it does require you to, and we're going to talk about it in a moment here, have faith and take the steps to do that. Now, the Two of Wands is here. It is the time of the crossroads. That is the card of, do you go forward and conquer this path that you can have, or do you sit in the same position that you're at? In the realms of in a relationship, it's like saying, do you stay in this same relationship in frustration and stubbornness, or do you find a new path? Do you change things up? That still can be in the relationship, but that there's an alternative route. August is that time where decisions are going to be made to change the path up a bit. For those of you who are not with somebody and perhaps dating, although by this time in this 2026 reading, it certainly looks like you've already experienced an energy with someone. But for those of you who have gone a more separate or independent way, you're going to likely be saying to yourself, is my logical line of thinking the only way, or can I go a new way? Maybe you only do dating sites, and this is that time where you're like, you know what, I should go hang out at the local country club or the financial district or whatever it is. I jokingly say that because my mother always says, my whole family is always on my case about why I don't date for money. I don't do that. But you guys out there, maybe that's something that you're interested in. They say that you can't, in the realms of like singlehood and dating, if you're just in your basement all the time, it's less likely that you're going to be out in the world meeting somebody who could be right for you. So changing things up in the dating realm is, I think, very evident of an energy that's going to come in the month of August. Whether it is you're with someone or not, changing the path here is going to be the name of the game. And in the next month, in that month of September, the Ace of Wands is here. So you do successfully change things up and things get very passionate. So in the month of September, the Ace of Wands is here. The Ace of Wands is passionate conversation. It is a new energy, a newness, a fiery energy that can happen in conversations that you have in love and romance. There's an interesting view that Aleister Crowley takes in the tarot when he thinks of the Ace of Wands. And I'm not a fan of Aleister Crowley, but I certainly have enjoyed researching into different tarot readers' perspective. I talk a lot about Arthur Edward Waite, but I mean, after all, one of the founding fathers of modern psychology, Carl Jung, your medical diagnostic books are based on a lot of his stuff in the world of science. He was a tarot reader, you know. It reminds me sometimes of how people who created NASA were trying to, what was his name? Trying to summon entities in a cave. Like, there's usually different characters in science that are kind of hand in hand with the mystical world out there. And one of the well-known people who were very on the mystical side was Aleister Crowley, because he was also trying to summon entities in his beast home. Now, when he looked at the Ace of Wands, because he had created his own tarot decks even, that wand was no longer a wand. It was a giant phallic symbol. That is to say, it was a picture of male genitalia that person is holding in their hand. And so it's easy to see under that expression how the Ace of Wands became associated to fiery, expressive moments of passion, climactic moments of passion. So you could find that after finally shifting into a new phase and new thought, less logical thinking, what you're dealing with all of a sudden in the month of September is passion from going on that new road, which is really, really nice for you guys, I think, to experience a burst of passion, a burst of, well, passion can lead to love even with the Ace of Wands in that dynamic. And for those of you who are in an established relationship with somebody already, that could be a reigniting of a relationship. Reigniting that passion and that spark in your relationship around September. It's also the seasonal transition, the month of September in 2026. And so usually when a season changes, humanity shifts along with that season, and we kind of forget about that. Like in the winter, people don't tend to go outside as much. In the spring, suddenly everybody's outside walking more. They've got more, vitamin D. That was a pun also. More vitamin D in on their system, right? In the summer months, you have this invigorating wantingness to go out and explore. And by the time we get into September, again, it's another transition, a seasonal transition that might find you doing different activities that bring up more of that passionate dynamic. Now, the Ace of Wands, I am going to shuffle here, and we are pulling out the Three of Cups in a reversal. That is unique to get because we saw the Three of Cups previously in that month of May. So what we can see here is, why is it that there's this new passionate expression happening, more communication? Because the person and the energy of the Three of Cups starts to rework itself in a new way. Those of you who experience, as I had mentioned, distance that starts in the dynamics of the month of May and leaves a person to really navigate this rigid thinking, that starts to get resolved around September. But not just starts to get resolved, but actually brings you back together by the time you get into September. And it's like round two, but not in a fighting sense. It's round two in a passionate sense, which is lovely. I do think that it can bring with it a resurfacing of lessons around indulgence, because the Three of Cups brings that vibe again of indulging in things and weaknesses in that sense. But I do think it's also, there's also a capability of you not to overindulge in that time of September in a negative way, but instead perhaps, like, since it's a card of unity, you might find that instead of going to parties with like a lot of drinking or events or hanging out with friends who might bring that in, then this overindulgence could be here because, quite frankly, you're overindulging in bodily activities like sex, because it's connected to the Ace of Wands. So for those of you who are in a relationship, you might kick boots a lot more in the month of September. For those of you who have your eye on somebody, they might, again, have a little bit of distance by the time you are dealing with the month of May, and suddenly they come back in around the time of September for you guys to have much more of a passionate experience. And for those of you who are single, again, you may find that you started to talk to somebody earlier on in 2026. It dwindled off a little bit by the time you get around May. You enjoy your summer, you transform, and then September-ish comes and that person comes back in to have another passionate exchange with you. Now, the Wheel of Fortune card is here for the month of October. And we are coming up to the end of the year here. And the Wheel of Fortune, with that card being here, it's in the reversal, but again, it's a major arcana card. So its one big secret is that you're on the path of life. And when the universe is bringing you on this path of life, your job is to participate in it. Your path will always be there. The people you're supposed to be with will always be there. The jobs you're supposed to have, in your destiny, in the predetermination aspect of the Great Wheel of Fortune, that show you that things will always go the way they are supposed to go. It asks one thing, though. The door is open and you have to step through it. The wheel is there, but you have to spin the wheel. It's nerve-wracking for people when they're in a new passionate situation or they're chatting with someone, that when it comes to walking down a new path in life, sometimes this nerve-wracking energy comes up because a person becomes afraid of continuing to walk down that path. So they freeze up a little bit. So in the month of October, with this in the reversal, somebody might have to remind themselves to not be so afraid of the unknown and keep walking. And I'm going to pull a clarification card again in a moment here, because that happens more often than you think when people get afraid of the unknown and they kind of freeze up a bit. Like as an example, you can have a completely new job and you could be walking down the hallway to the cafeteria and you're wondering, how do you get to the human resources office? But you've never been to the human resources office before. So you either stand in the cafeteria and you never find the human resources office, or you walk down the hallway and you see if it's good, or you see if you need a left turn, or you see if you need a right turn, and you might make a mistake. You might walk down the wrong hall and you have to correct it, and then you go down a different way. But at the end of it, you finally do see a little sign at the top of the roof or whatnot of your ceiling that says Human Resources Office this way. That's what happens in life and in relationships too. Whether you're walking down the hallway of your job, or whether you've come to a new town for the first time, or whether you're in a new aspect of a relationship, we get nervous to walk down the halls of life because we're afraid to make the wrong move. But if you keep walking, if you get up and you spin the wheel of fortune, eventually you will come to the right hallway. So that it's just a time frame essentially to remind yourself in October that it's okay if there's some unknowns and some uncertainties. What's not okay is being stagnant in your life. And I mean, that's just it. Being stagnant in your life allows for no forward progress, and it just keeps you in overthinking, over logical thinking, militant thinking, and not enough expressions of passion and new directions. And this whole reading seems like very Gemini, by the way. As much as I feel like I could be talking about somebody that you might be dealing with, you might have a spouse or a person in your life that is very hyper logical. Let's be frank here, Geminis are notorious for thinking like that. They just think in like linear fashion, and they can autofocus on that thing for a really long period of time. The card that you have, oh, you got the Queen of Cups again. Look at that. Okay. What you're wondering in this month of October is about whether you should continue with the Queen of Cups that we saw showing up in the month of March. This exact card came up. This is doubling down on that vibe for those of you who are wondering if you should talk to somebody from earlier on in the year of 2026. You certainly do seem like you're thinking about that again, because that person who wants to deal with fairness and acts of service is showing up. And the fact that this is coming 1 month after you have a passionate experience means that I think the passionate experience that you will exchange with this particular person, whether it's a queen or a king, right? You can interchange the energies of a given card for masculine or feminine, but it must have been enough of an experience in September of 2026 that, quite frankly, you're still thinking about them by the month of October. But you're thinking about whether you should continue with them, and not in a negative way. Notice in this entire reading, we've never got the Devil card, the Tower card, the cards of heartbreaks with skeletons with swords in their hearts. We never even got the card of anxiety. This entire concept doesn't bring destruction with this relationship or with this person you might be communicating with. Basically, it's just an overthinking problem. It's like a years-long tearing back the onion layers of a thinking dynamic. And in the month of October, that dynamic shows up again, where now, though, you've had a little bit of practice and the relationship or whoever you're talking to has had a little bit of integration on and off for 2026, which should insinuate that it becomes easier as you go along to not feel so frozen and to just allow for things to go with the flow. Ultimately, though, it also looks like the people that you're chatting with or the relationship dynamic that you're in is pondering this from a position of fairness. So if you do find yourself considering the idea of fairness in and around the month of October with a particular person that you have your eye on or that you're talking to, remember, if you can, that fairness is in the eye of the beholder, but it's also from the divine perspective. So try not to necessarily frame your relationship like it should automatically be white picket fences on a hill somewhere with green grass, when usually the universe has a different fairness that might be brought into your life. A fairness for a person to grow, a fairness for a person to be independent, but also a fairness for two people to communicate well, or a fairness for two people to express themselves in their own unique ways at the time and the length that it might need. The month of November is the next on the list here as we come to that hour mark and almost the end of our reading here. The Knight of Swords is here. This is actually your second knight. Both of them. This was in the reversal originally. This is in the reversal. And I think it's important to comment on the fact that there are two knights here in the reversal, because that deals with somebody who's susceptible to things, susceptible to outer influences like susceptible to people in society, susceptible to the way their friends think, susceptible to what their job needs from them, susceptible to what they think about modern dating. But with the Knight of Swords in the reversal position, it has one of two fairly important meanings. One of them being somebody who can be overly extravagant. And I'm going to pull an extra card to see which side of this the Knight of Swords is going to swing here. But also, it's the card of incapability, which I do think that that's more probable in the reversal of the outcome, that somebody feels a little incapable, because the month before, the Wheel of Fortune is about somebody freezing up a little bit and needing to remind themselves that it's okay to spin the wheel again. So it does feel like passionate exchanges, and this person kind of dips back into this vibe of stagnancy and indecision that's happening. But it resolves itself. I can see it at the very end. The last card of December, victory, resolution, problem solved, great outcome for the end of your guys' year, but I'll get to that in a moment. The Knight of Swords is being paired with the Magician. Yep. The Magician is the card of illusion when it's in the reversal. Think of a magician. In the upright, they make magic. In the reversal, they make trickery, right? Trickery and illusion. So this person is kind of giving themselves a bit of self-delusion. This could be your energy, or this could be their energy, where they're kind of putting like a mask over their mind, or rosy colored glasses on. They're not seeing something clearly, and it's causing them to freeze up again in November. The Magician card is also notorious in the reversal for being the card of the over-controlling person. That's not to say you're going to be overly controlled. It's an indication that this person's overthinking again. Their brain is trying to solve a problem because it's connected to the Knight of Swords. And if you know anything about the swords, that's their thinking concept, right? The Magician here has the ability to pick up any tool. They can pick up the sword, which is their thoughts. They can pick up the pentacles, which is stuff in the physical world that they want to work with, like tools. They could pick up the cups, which is the world of their emotions, right? Or they could pick up the wands, which is their willpower to get something done. It's being connected to the sword, so he's picking up his intellect, essentially. But in the reversal, he's over-controlling it, so he's overthinking. He or she is overthinking. And so you might find, because overthinking often comes out in communication issues, then in the month of October, there could be some frazzled communication that happens in the realms of dating because somebody is overthinking. But again, let's get into that last month here for the month of December, because December has a great energy of the Chariot. This is victory. This is winning. This is solving the problem. This is the eureka moment where you finally say, oh my gosh, I've got it now. I've got it down pat. I know how to go forward with this relationship. Not just I know how to go forward, but the Chariot is when someone's coming to the finish line. This is you saying, holy shit, this relationship, this dynamic, this person I'm talking to, this lesson that I needed to learn in myself, I'm not just solving it to go forward. I fucking see the outcome now. That's the key. Because the overthinking that's happening for a lot of the portion of this 2026 reading, as I mentioned earlier on, it happens because of the fear of the unknown and the inability for a person to walk down the hallways of life because they can't see if they should go left or right. They can't see the human resources office or the metaphoric relationship of the human resources office at the end of the hallway. But once you get to December, you can see the outcome. And it's a winning outcome. Who ran on the chariots in medieval history? Who was it riding on them? They were the emperors. They were the kings. They were the ones who owned shit, got it done, and came victorious up to their people, came to points of celebration. So you guys have victory coming once you get to that point of December. And that might very well spill over in more than just ways of your relationship, because the chariot is ran and functioned by the kings and the emperors. It can essentially also indicate that you have successes that happen in the rest of your life also in the month of December. Other areas, perhaps like Pentacles areas, finances, career. But let's pull a last card and see what we have. You have the Devil card with it. Look at that. What do you gain victorious over? What is it that victory happens with? You metaphorically kick the ass of the devil. What does the devil do? He deals with bondage, being stuck in obsessive thinking, overthinking, bad habits. So the problem that existed in the relationship for overthinking, over talking, or over obsessive, or over negative thinking even, maybe somebody, again, maybe too militant with their logical concepts, that gets tossed to the side. That's a great energy to be victorious about. Because if you took a couple rounds in 2026 to learn the lessons that come up with overthinking, over-controlling, then by the time you get to the devil card, if you win against the devil, you don't have to do that lesson again. You get it. Consider overthinking and obsessive thoughts to have like 2 notches down and out of your life by the end of 2026 in the realms of relationships. And that likely influences the rest of your life, right? When someone learns how to not be so overthinking or over talking or overly negative in one area of life, it trickles into another area of life because they just practice it in a different facet so that they learn the skill set, right? And so that's going to abundantly blossom relationships for you, but likely for your person even, and can influence the way that you handle everything from negotiations to jobs to lifestyle in other realms of life. I think that's lovely. And that's it, guys. That is the dynamic of the reading here. You have what seems to be a lesson learning, growth, and passionate filled dynamic. And the only negative card that came up, that's like the devil and heartbreak, came up at the end of the year when you win against it. So it doesn't even hold its negative connotation. It's a wonderful 2026 romance reading with a lot of growth. And so I am going to leave you off with this. Again, the timestamps are in the description below this video, and I'll put one in the comment section for you. You're more than welcome to come back to this reading later on in the year if you ever want to revisit a certain month. If you're ever interested in your own yearly or even a 6-month reading, I've got 1-month readings, 6-month readings. You can get a hold of me for private readings anytime. That's also in the description below. And if you ever just want to chat, I'm doing a lot of dream interpretation videos on my TikTok, my Instagram, my Facebook, to just hang out with me there. I am the only Linny D with green hair in her profile picture, so I'm really easy to find, and I would love to chat with you guys. All right, I will talk to you later. Thank you very much for joining me, and ciao for now.